it reverts back to the source. So it's got to go back to what it knows if it doesn't know what to do. Kind of like if you freeze up when you're improvising and you don't know what to play, you're just going to play some stupid licks you learned 30 years ago. That's what this program's going to do.
Or just plays like Rite of Spring licks.
Sure, yeah.
For this episode, I feel like you dug up, unearthed a time capsule from 41 years ago that directly relates to the AI episode that we just did.
Yeah, I found something weird, so it should be cool to talk about.
Yeah, super weird. And I feel like this guy that wrote the article, he was like the AI Nostradamus.
Probably one of them.
Probably one of them.
Guy,
yeah. An early pioneer of AI. And he just saw a lot of things coming with AI in music, but I think he was off the mark on a lot of things too.
Yeah, he was more accurate than inaccurate, but...
True, yeah. Like Nostradamus. So this article we're talking about comes from Option magazine of 1985.
Their first edition. This
was the very first.
Yep.
Oh, cool. I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
So we got the PDF of it. And it is just, it's pretty cool. And the article is called Entangling Computers in Music by Eric Mueller. Mueller? I'm going to go with Mueller.
Sure.
So when this came out, computers were just starting to become mainstream in terms of the music world, like with synthesizers and whatnot.
I think they've been around for 5 or so years at the most.
Yeah.
3 to 5 years.
Mainstream in respects to like normal people could get them. They're being more mass produced, more affordable, still really expensive for back then, I'm sure. But you were seeing them more and more in like music stores, for example. So right off the bat in this article, Mueller says, quote unquote, why limit the use of computers to the creation of predetermined musical compositions? And he goes on to say, ultimately, computers will completely alter our current notions of music and art. Prediction number 1, check. Definitely came true. So then he goes on to present 2 ideas for the incorporation of computers into music and art. So he does, well, in our examples, I'm just going to stick to music. Like he gives some art examples too that were pretty cool, but
he's laying out foundations of artificial intelligence in music. It's not just software.
Yeah.
It's AI music in 1985.
1985. Yeah. 41 years ago. He was way ahead of his time. So the 2 ideas he had were interactive works and distributed works. So we'll dive into those. So interactive work is one that obviously interacts with the user. And when I say user in this case, it's just, you can just sub in the word musician.
Yeah.
And I think that the interesting thing throughout this whole article is he uses very computer science terms, even though he's talking about music. Did you notice
clearly
that?
A computer scientist. So.
Yeah, he always uses user and programmer. But in parentheses,
that's what it is. I mean,
it is. But in our context, I'll say musician composer to relate it better. They'll be interchangeable. So yeah. Anyhow, interactive work. Obviously, it's you interact with the AI. So the viewer or the listener interacts in ways that are predetermined by the programmer or composer, right?
Yeah.
So the composer basically sets parameters and the user/musician works within those parameters.
And the more you feed into the program, the more complex the result.
Yeah. At first, when I was reading this article, I was like, oh, Stefon Harris's Harmony Cloud. That's what this is. No, it's not. Because that doesn't actually interact with you. That's just all predetermined. There's no reactions with the AI.
Yeah, I think the key here is the reactionary element
of
what he's describing.
Yeah.
And Yeah, we can go into how that's different than modern AI later, but that's the key element to focus on.
Yeah, and just side note here, I didn't even ask you this before. I was kind of saving it for the podcast. I wasn't clear in his examples back then if this was already happening or not.
I think he was just spitballing off the top of his head. I mean, people probably experimented with it.
Yeah.
He probably experimented with it, but he wasn't selling it or recording it or...
Right. Okay.
But I wouldn't be shocked if this did happen a year later or something on an album that I wasn't aware of.
Yeah, I'm kind of like fast forwarding because I do remember at the end of the article, he goes into how to start experimenting with this yourself. So
yeah,
I don't think it was that hard to...
If I had to guess, he's just a computer genius who was writing a fun article for him at the time.
Yeah.
Probably based on some books he had just read in that bibliography section. And was like, oh, I bet musicians would think this is cool. And that was it. Like, I don't think there was much more thought put into it.
Yeah, we'll go into his biography later, but I didn't see anywhere where he was cited as being a musician.
No, but a genius as a child who takes a band class knows how to do this. You know?
Yeah, good point.
Yeah.
Okay, so back to interactive work. So yeah, this is not, at first I was like, oh, it's like what we do now and like what Stefon Harris is doing. No, not at all. So it's not just a musician playing along with the program like the Stefon Harris example, but it reacts. That's the big thing here. So whatever the musician plays in his example, it's going to affect the output. So whatever the musician plays, like I said, it's going to affect the piece in the context only of what the composer, programmer allowed, arranged, set the parameters, right?
Yep.
So what Eric Mueller says is, since a single performance or execution of an interactive work does not completely define the work, the artistic contribution must be taken to be the program and the possibility it contains. So that was like the program itself, he says, becomes the work of art.
Which I think is only half true.
Oh, we'll get to that. Yeah, I know you have thoughts. And to complete his quote, he goes, this implies that artists will become programmers and perhaps the reverse as well. And
that's a broad prediction.
Well, I feel like the reverse part, the programmers becoming quote unquote artists, is what we've seen.
Right. In the AI scene. Yeah.
Right. If you refer back to our previous AI episode where, you know, that lady she's a poet and she has an artist that becomes Billboard, you know, charting on Billboard.
AI artist.
Yeah. So I think he nailed the programmers becoming artists, but I don't think the artists have quite exactly caught up to the inverse of that. Do you? I
think on an extremely limited scale, people that use programs like Ableton, Max, MSP, there's programming involved. And then if you design your own contact instruments, or there's there's limited programming involved with that.
Yeah.
And then there's entire audio engineering courses around programming stuff, but it's very limited to niche corners of music.
Yeah, and I kind of feel like you probably have to have some money to explore those options. Like
as long as you have a computer.
Yeah? Okay, so it's not really price restrictive.
No, it's just like time restrictive.
Time restriction. Yeah. And most musicians, I'm sure,
they'd rather play a saxophone than learn code.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. So I don't know. So my input right there is I don't think he quite nailed that. I think the inverse he did.
Yeah.
So then he goes into real heavy detail about how this work would be created from like a complicated model down to a base level model. It's just a lot for me, but basically from my understanding is that for the computer to respond meaningfully to what the musician's inputting, what they're playing, it needs an abstract model of music. So it needs to understand harmony, counterpoint, and phrases rather than just reading like raw waveforms or low level sequences.
It's fairly accurate. Yeah. I think it takes the initial model of an example melody or an example phrase and bases a lot of its extended reactions off of that. And the more examples and the more complicated examples you might give it, the more complicated of a reaction you might get.
Okay.
So if you feed it multiple source elements, you'll probably get a much wider variety of the output. And
in the article, from my understanding too, he gave a bunch of examples, but one was just like a if this, then that follows kind of logic in it. And
I think he listed 2 of those, but you could imagine 300 of those in one program, and then it would be a much more robust knowledge set for the program to go off of.
Right. And one of the examples specifically was just with one player, right? Doing the program, the AI has the melody on a loop. And then the user starts responding to that. And then
playing along with it.
By playing along with it. And then my understanding is the computer starts picking up on those inputs and interweaving that into the melody, and it keeps on cycling until by the end of it, whenever the user decides is the end, it doesn't even really resemble the original melody. Or possibly it
could or it could not. There's moments in the if-then logic example he gave where if nothing the user gives this program is similar to its source, it reverts back to the source. So it's got to go back to what it knows if it doesn't know what to do.
Oh, okay.
Kind of like if you freeze up when you're improvising and you don't know what to play, you're just going to play some stupid licks you learned 30 years ago. That's what this program's going to do.
Or just plays like Rite of Spring licks.
Sure, yeah.
Not that it's stupid, but yeah. All right. So that was number 1. Interactive works was one thing he thought of. The second was distributed work, which this I followed a little more. It was basically like jamming out with AI, but with multiple people involved. Multiple computers, right? So, quote unquote, he says, data networks which allow computers to communicate information have a potential for the creation of works in which programs cooperate in performing a piece. And I'm just going to straight up read his example here because I couldn't have phrased it better. It wasn't. So he goes, here's an example of such a distributed work. Suppose several composers each have a personal computer, which is connected to a keyboard for input and a synthesizer for output. Further, suppose that each composer has created an interactive music program, like we just mentioned before, basically. In addition, suppose that each computer can communicate with others over a phone line. So I had to look up, pause here in this quote. I had to look up, I was like, wait a minute. Were computers communicating over phone lines back then? What do you think?
I think very advanced ones were.
Yeah.
Not your home bullshit computer.
Yeah, like your dial-up wasn't. No, I had to look it up. I wasn't sure. I was, but it was kind of common knowledge that this was possible, but dial-up phone lines have been used since I think the mid-60s. I read up on it to communicate. I didn't know that. I was like, holy crap.
Governments and big corporations.
Yeah. I thought for a second, I was like, holy crap, this dude was like freaking way ahead of it. So he really wasn't. He just was enough of a nerd that he knew. Yeah, if you just get a phone line and do this. So anyhow, back to his quote. Now, each program may be rigged so that its input consists of the local keyboard plus the output of each of the other computers. Each program will not only respond to the human at that location, but also to the output of the programs at all other locations. Of course, the output of the programs at other locations is based on the human input at that location and all of the other locations, or the other programs, excuse me. The music resulting from this feedback loop will be a complex composition of its components, the programs, and the human performers. That got really meta for a second there.
So it's like your first example, but with more computers and more humans.
Yeah.
And all the computers have their own unique programs.
Right.
So it's like, just a bigger version of the original thought.
Yeah. So he basically creates a massive feedback loop, resulting in an unpredictable group improvisation where the band's members, quote unquote, are a mix of human performers and the computer programs reacting to one another.
Yeah, I could imagine one of the computers is the drummer, one of the computers is the bass player. It could get pretty wild.
Yeah, I'm reading this. I'm like, well, this is obviously possible now. Like, I kind of want to hear like what would happen.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you got to consider the latency and it's not like playing with people in a room with 3 computers. It's like,
what if you just did it over Zoom?
It would sound pretty bad.
Yeah, it would sound like shit. But I wrote a note here. I wrote, basically, this is dial-up avant-garde music. This is what was happening.
Yeah, it couldn't be a very rhythmic interaction between these elements because of the distance.
Yeah.
Plus, who is summing all of the sounds into one output?
Yeah, like, he didn't go that far.
You can't. Yeah, you need something to capture all of the remote things into one sonic picture.
Yeah.
Which he didn't describe.
Yeah, so that makes me think that this was just him, like you said, spitballing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Okay. It's fun, though.
Oh, yeah.
And it probably sounded, people reading that magazine back then were probably thinking it was pretty far out there.
Definitely.
And now it's like, oh, no, it sounds reasonable. But like you said, here's some problems with it.
Yeah.
Okay, so then I thought this was cool. He, like I kind of mentioned before, he then goes on to advise how people that are interested in this can get started. So first off, he says learning the programming language LISP or Lisp, which is a popular language for AI programming, he said. And then so I was like, I don't know what this means. I have to look it up. So Lisp, historically, it stands for list processing, is a family of programming language with a long history, recognized as the second oldest high-level programming language still in common use after Fortran. Did I just speak Chinese to you, or does that actually ring a bell?
50%.
50%. It was 0% to me. It was originally specified by John McCarthy in 1958. Holy shit. At MIT, it is based on Alonzo Church's Lambda calculus and was initially designed for artificial intelligence research. Again, this is like Chinese to me, but it's really interesting that this language that we still use for AI goes all the way back to the 50s.
I always got hung up on Lambda functions in Python. I just couldn't fully grasp that, but
me neither.
Yeah.
It makes you feel better. So he's like, first you got to understand this language. Second, you got to get a computer that runs on Lisp.
Right.
I think it's funny that it's a language and it's
called Lisp. Yeah.
This can be anything from a computer with a 1-bit output. I thought that was funny. Port connected to your stereo or an Apple was around back then. Interface via MIDI to your synthesizer to a complete.
MIDI was around back then.
Apple and MIDI. To a complete digital music synthesis laboratory at a university. So he's like, you can get Apple, you can do this, or you can just go to your local handy dandy music laboratory. Like everyone had one back then. Okay. And then he has a couple of quotes that I thought were really, really interesting. First one is, he says, whatever you use, remember that the most interesting possibilities lie in the software that you create rather than the hardware.
Lies.
Why?
I think it's equally interesting on both ends of the spectrum. Like the hardware you create, you could be referring to synthesizers.
Yeah.
The hardware could be your saxophone you're blowing into. You know, I wouldn't say a line of code is more interesting than a trumpet or a saxophone.
Yeah.
It's kind of bullshit.
Yeah.
He's just looking at it from the numbers perspective.
Right.
Not thinking about both sides.
You know, this quote to me kind of reminded me of on the musical equivalent of like Charlie Parker was the old fable of him just picking up a plastic saxophone and just ripping on it. That's kind of that, you know, the plastic software in this comparison was his software and the hardware. No, sorry. The software was Charlie Parker. The hardware was the plastic saxophone. Yeah. So in that case, that's why.
Sure.
I was like, yeah, I get it. I can vibe with that.
But you could also imagine somebody writing the code who isn't the performer. And then you have, you know, the composer would be the programmer. The performer would not even know what the program's doing. So why is one better than the other? You know, I don't
think he said better. He just said most interesting.
Well, that implies better, but
yeah. Okay, so here's the last quote from him that I thought was interesting. He says, "It is difficult to anticipate in advance all the possibilities inherent in the true incorporation of computers into art and music. Here I have presented a few suggestions in the hopes that more people will experiment along these lines. I look forward to seeing how such systems and programmer/composers develop in the future." So I want to know, I don't know if Eric Mueller is still alive, but I want to know what he thinks of this freaking...
I think he is.
I want to like find him and be like, yeah, what do you think of AI hitting Billboard? Like, are you for it? Like, what do you think?
I wonder if he even cares about this topic anymore.
I bet he cares. I bet he cares.
Like, I'm sure he cares about AI, but I don't know about AI and music, but who knows?
Yeah. I have a little more info on him. I dug up on him because I was curious who.
But you don't know if he's still alive?
I don't. I couldn't find that. There's a Wikipedia page not about him, but of another AI project that he did. There's short bios on MIT's website of him. So he actually earned his Bachelor of Science degree in computer science and engineering at MIT. Then he moved to the West Coast, got his master's and his PhD in computer science from UCLA. And I think you mentioned this magazine Option it was based out of California, right?
LA, yeah.
It was based out of LA. So
it was called Sonic Options Network is the company that created the magazine.
Okay.
And Scott Becker was the founder. Who's
Scott Becker?
I don't know.
I feel like I should
just
know.
Learned about him yesterday.
Have you ever heard of this magazine prior to this? Interesting. So he's known for his early AI work in the 1980s. The article you found was written right in the middle of his doctoral studies at UCLA's Artificial Intelligence Laboratory. So in 83, under the advisement of Michael G. Dyer, who's another AI genius apparently from back then, they developed the AI program I mentioned before. It's called Daydreamer. And this is kind of out too, but this program modeled the human stream of thought and simulated humans daydreaming and the emotions behind it.
That's a lot.
Right? Like totally different from the music thing. Yeah, I think you were right. After just saying that, I'm like, that's some heavy shit.
The music thing was just a fun article.
Yeah. I feel like in the meantime, it's just like, oh, you can jerk around with music. Do this.
Seriously, yeah.
So this guy was a freaking genius. So while he's doing Daydreamer in 83 through 85, he's writing this article. He then went to IBM and he became first he went on to become a research scientist at the MIT Media Lab, and he was a renowned member of the IBM team that developed the Watson question answering system. Do you remember this?
I've heard of it, but I don't know much about it.
It famously defeated people on Jeopardy, on the game show Jeopardy. That was him. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
I know I've seen clips of this happening on Jeopardy. And then he actually later held the position of director of intelligent assistance at Capital One. So he's written since then extensively on AI, including books, Daydreaming in Humans and Machines, probably related to his research, I'm assuming, and multiple editions of Common Sense Reasoning. Excuse me.
And I just started playing it. And I want to just put it on automatic. So I hit it. Now, if I speed this thing up, I can go up to so fast that we cross the pitch rhythm barrier. And then I'm dealing with textures, which I can then do these things with timbrely for expression. And all the harmonic stuff is still present.
All right, so some closing thoughts here from us. I have some, you jotted some down. His early AI musical example seemingly lends itself much better to avant-garde experimental music than AI of today.
Definitely, because it's all interactive, free improvisation. I'm sure if you turn on one of these weird programs, it would just sound completely atonal and weird and no rhythms. And training it to be in time is a whole different task, and I'm sure you could do that through the coding, but at least what he described was just free and crazy. Yeah,
it sounds fun. I wish this is where AI music of today went to instead of freaking Suno and Sora instead of those apps.
I think both are reasonable, but I think, it's more fun sounding.
Yeah.
At least for us.
Yeah. It's pretty cool that he could predict advanced use cases too. But he definitely didn't predict AI is going to write a #1 R&B hit that's going to just be the #1 charting R&B pop song. He did not see that coming.
Yeah. He definitely didn't even touch upon the elements of copying styles of music in their entirety, which is really the main use case for AI music now. It's not making anything new or reactive. It's just saying, here's a clone of this style. I do it better than you do because I'm a computer. That's really all it does.
I agree with that. And I just had a thought too. This guy's obviously a genius, right? Super intelligent. And he saw possibilities of exploring music, improvisation. I feel like a lot of super intelligent people appreciate improv. Even if they're not musicians, I feel like they appreciate jazz music in general or any kind of improvisational music, avant-garde, whatever. And he probably did. I doubt if he would have ever even thought of, we could use it to copy other music. You know what I mean? Like when you're that smart, it's like
you're being more creative about it than just copying something.
Yeah.
Which is what it's become dumbed down to.
Right. So this guy was just a next level thinker to begin with, and I don't think he was trying to copy anything.
Yeah.
So
just creating stuff.
That's probably why he didn't even go that route. And then the last thought is that Option Magazine seems like a treasure.
Yeah. I want to find more copies of it, which I tried. It was pretty difficult.
Yeah, I have a note that it was run out of LA for over 20 years.
Yeah.
And I'm never heard of it, so I'm going to...
There's some copies that have more mainstream artists on the cover, but
the
early ones, like the first one I just found this in, had the Art Ensemble of Chicago on the cover. So
freaking awesome. Cool. Well, I'm looking forward to finding more of those.
Yeah. If you enjoyed this podcast, please visit birchgrove.io. It's the home base for our record label, Birch Grove Media. You can buy a vinyl record or a digital album and sign up for our newsletter where you'll receive notifications about future events and releases. Also visit podfuelmedia.com. I'm one of the owners of this company, and if you like how this podcast was produced, we do that for our clients: audio, video edits, syndication, consulting, and startup for a new podcast. So book a call with us and we'll get your podcast going right away. You can also go to buymeacoffee.com/birchgrovemedia and leave us a tip if you'd like. Thank you very much.